Before we start this video, a large thank you to Maisie, TI Make Game, Hiroshi, SYCX1998, Ashkar, Rendalex, Pierre, Snail, Leo, Pavel, Rule 34 Games, John, Tony, Edificator, Lucas, Simply Unstoppable, Ryan, Mohammed, Jetel, Nando, Hulk, and Z for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Hello guys, and today we're going to do part 1 of our bonfire system, so by the end of the episode you should have something that looks a little bit like this. Okay, so just go ahead now and go into your scene and drag in any object you want to represent the bonfire. I have this bonfire model here. I believe it is from a Cinti pack, and I went ahead and just put a sword into it just for the added visual flair. Again, you can use anything. It doesn't specifically need to be a bonfire, obviously. Go ahead and use whatever you so desire. And once you've got that in the scene, we can start and get on the go. So I'm going to go ahead now and click on my bonfire, and I'm going to add a component. We're going to make a script, and I'm just going to call it Bonfire Interactable. So this is going to derive from our Interactable base class. If you don't remember what that is, it's what we use for our items as well. This basically allows the player to interact with the object with this script attached to it. So let's put in our namespace. Mine is SG, as is per tradition, and I'm going to erase the start and update functionality. And then I'm going to make this derive from Interactable. Okay, so now just as a little refresher, let's go ahead now and go actually open up the Interactable base class and see what we got going on here. So as you can see, there is just an Interactable virtual void, and this is called whenever you interact with the object. So let's make an override for this function. And I'm going to call that, rather I'm going to erase the base interact and just put a debug.log here. We can just say something like, you have interacted with the bonfire, or bonfire interacted with, and there we go. So just so we know that it's actually working. And then let's go above here. Let's make some pseudo code for future additions to this. We're going to say we're going to need the location of the bonfire for teleportation purposes. So for example, a bonfire in area 1 is going to have its unique location tag versus a bonfire in area 2. And then we're going to have the bonfire unique ID. This is for saving purposes. We're going to get to saving real soon, so we know which bonfires we have lit. So when the game loads in, any bonfires that have been activated will activate on awake. We'll come back to that when we get to saving, which will be in the very near future. So then we're going to make a header, and I'm just going to call this header Bonfire Teleportation Transform, or just Bonfire Teleport Transform, and this is going to basically be the location the player will get transported to when you teleport to this bonfire. So you can use serialized field, or I'm just going to use public because that's mostly what I always do. And I'm going to make a transform variable, and I'm just going to call this Bonfire Teleport Transform. So we can drag it in the inspector when we make it, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm just going to put that right here. And then let's make an additional header, because we still have some more stuff we need. So I'm just going to start by saying header, and I will call this activation status, and this will depict whether the bonfire has already been lit or activated. So I'm going to make a public bool is active. Actually, you know what, I'm going to say has been activated. Alternatively, you can say has been lit or whatever. It's all the same really. As long as you know what it means, then put whatever you want there. So I'm then going to make an awake method, and we need to do a few things on the awake method in regards to the has been activated. But first I'm going to make a header, and I'm just going to call this bonfire effects. So I'm going to make a public particle systems variable. I think it's called particle systems. I want to say it's particle systems. Yes, okay, particle system variable. And I'm going to call this one the activation effects. This will only play when you activate the bonfire. And then I'm going to make a public particle systems fire effects. This one just plays when the bonfire is lit. So in awake, we're going to say if has been activated. Then we're going to say the fire effects is what we'll start off with. We want to enable the game object if it's not enabled. So I'll say fireeffects.gameObject.setActive equals true, and then fireeffects.play. So this just activates the game object of the particle effects and then allows them to play. And then let's put a line up here just so it's clear. If the bonfire has already been activated when you load into the scene by the player, then we're going to play the bonfire or just the fire effects, just to indicate that this has been activated in the past. And again, we won't be able to save activations until we start saving and loading, but this code will be very applicable in the future. So down here with interact, we're going to say if the bonfire has been activated, and this is when you interact with the object, we're going to want to open the teleport menu or the bonfire menu. And if it hasn't been activated, well, we want to activate it. So let's activate the bonfire. And we're going to do a few things here when we activate it. We're going to start by saying the activation effects.gameObject.setActive is equal to true. And then we are going to play the activation effects, the particle effects. And then I'm just going to say fire effects.gameObject.setActive is equal to true. And then we're going to play the fire effects as well. Okay, so that's most of the, all the effects really, except for the sound effect, which we'll get to for the actual activation. So now let's minimize that and go back into the scene here. And what you want to do is, or what I've done at least, is I've parented my particle effects under the bonfire and I've disabled their game objects. So just do that and then drag them in like so. And I just have that sword there too. That's not really important, but again, that's just there for the looks. So let's go and create an empty game object under this bonfire. I'm going to call it Bonfire Teleport Transform, and I'm just going to drag that just outside the bonfire, and then I'll drag that back in. And in the future episodes, when we hook up teleportation, this is where the player will be dragged to if they teleport to this specific bonfire. Now, the interactable text. This one's a bit different here because it's not going to be the same if it's been activated. For example, if you haven't activated, it'll say light bonfire, but if you have activated, it will say rest. So on awake, let's say else here, and let's say interactable text is equal to, this is if the bonfire has been activated, then we're going to make the interactable text equal rest. And if it has not been activated, then we're going to make the interactable text equal light bonfire. Or you can really put it whatever you want. Again, I'm just using light bonfire because of Souls. This is a Dark Souls and Unity tutorial series. Maybe you have something else besides a bonfire. Okay, so then make sure the tag is set to interactable, or else we won't be able to interact with it. And then let's make an interactable collider. So let's make a sphere collider, set it to a trigger, and then turn on gizmo so you can see it. And I'm going to make that just a little bit bigger than the actual bonfire, so no matter where you are on the side of it, you can interact with it. I'm also just going to make a box collider inside this, so I can't walk on top of my bonfire. You don't need to do that. I'm just doing that. Let's add an audio source. As I mentioned earlier, we need to add an audio effect or an audio cue to show we are playing or activating the bonfire. So I'm going to call upon a variable of type audio source up here, and I'm going to call that on awake. I'm going to say audio source equals get component audio source. And then we want to basically store an audio clip that we're going to play when we activate the bonfire. So down here in interact, if we haven't activated the bonfire and we are activating it, let's say audio source dot play one shot, I believe is what we're supposed to use, not play. Yes, it is play one shot. And then we need to pass an audio clip, which we don't have right now, so let's make a variable for an audio clip up here. And I'm going to make it public, so we can just drag it in the inspector. So I'll say public audio clip. And then I'm just going to call this bonfire activation sound effects. There we go. And then just drag in the clip that you want to play when the bonfire is activated. And let's say in here, bonfire activation sound effects, and let's save that. Now if I minimize this and go in the inspector, that should refresh. Yes, I'm just going to drag in my audio clip like so. Excellent. Okay, now back into the script again. Down here on the activate bonfire, let's come and say has been activated equals true. Can't forget to do that. And then we're going to say interactable text is equal to rest. So if you are activating the bonfire, make sure you change the bool to true and then change the interactable text to rest down here as well. Okay, so let's go over now to the player and go to the animation window. I'm going to drag in my animation for activating the bonfire, which I've just called bonfire_activate. You can use any animation you want to here. This animation is just a gentleman reaching his hand over something. Okay, so let's go back in here on the interact again, and we're going to say player manager because we're passing the player manager here when we interact. Player animator manager play target animation. And I'm just going to go back and copy this so I can paste it. Bonfire activate, And then we're going to say true because we are interacting and we want to lock our player so he cannot move while he's doing this. Okay, cool. That looks good. All right, now let's go to the player UI because I want to make a pop-up that'll show when we've activated it. So let's go over here now and let's create, we're probably going to need to create a new empty game object for pop-ups. Yeah, let's do this. Let's create a new empty game object. I'm just going to call this pop-ups. We can handle the you died pop-up here as well. And I'm just going to hit Alt and make it the full size of this canvas. I'm going to make another empty game object called Bonfire Activation, or Bonfire Activated, sorry, and then Alt and make it the full size of the panel again. And then I'm going to make a UI image and hold Alt and make it the full size of the panel. And you can use a text here, but I'm just going to quickly make an image in Photoshop, which I've already done. So as you can see here, I can just drag it in. And I've just made this in Photoshop in a few seconds, but you can just use a normal text if you'd like. Both will work, and I'll show you why. So I'm just going to call this Bonfire Lit. You can just call that pop-up text if you want, doesn't really matter. So we're actually going to add a canvas group component to the Bonfire Activated game object. So let's add a canvas group. And we're using this because you see there's a thing there called alpha. And if we actually turn this to 0, it fades it out completely. So we're going to use this to our advantage, and we're going to basically fade in and out this pop-up. So let's make another script here. And I'm going to call it Bonfire Pop-Up UI. So we're going to use coroutines here for fading it in and out. So I'm going to delete the start and update method, put in my namespace as is per tradition. Not GT, wrong project, that's SG. So yeah, if you guys haven't used coroutines before, I encourage you to go check them out. They're pretty straightforward, but we're going to utilize one for fading in and fading out here. So I'm going to start by declaring a variable of type canvas group. I'm going to call it canvas. I will say canvas equals get component canvas group on awake because it is sitting on the same game object as this. And then I'm going to make an enumerator, which is the keyword for coroutine, called fade in pop-up. And then I'm going to make another one called fade out pop-up. So coroutines are, again, pretty straightforward. Might be a little confusing if you're new to Unity, but I assume most of you who are this far in the series probably have a good understanding what a coroutine is. So I'm going to say GameObject.setActive is equal to true at the top of the fade in pop-up coroutine. And then I am going to say for, we're going to use a for loop here. I'm going to change the int value to a float value. I'm going to change the I'm just going to call it fade. And we're going to check to see if fade, we're going to start out by saying fade is equal to 0.05f. And then if fade is less than 1, then we're going to say fade is equal to fade plus 0.05f. Now you can change these numbers if you want. I've just tested with these and I find this has a nice effect in my opinion. So then we're going to say canvas.alpha is equal to fade. So I think a lot of you know where I'm going with this now. And then right below this, what we want to do is we want to check to see if the fade is reaching a number that is greater than 0.9f. And then we're going to say if fade is greater than 0.9f, start coroutine, fade out pop-up. Okay, so then we need to end with the keyword here, yield. Whoops, I didn't spell that correctly. Yield return new, wait for seconds, and then 0.05f, I'm just going to say. Okay, and down here in fade out pop-up, since this is called at 0.9, we want to also wait a couple seconds before we actually start fading out the image. Otherwise, it'll come and go way too fast. So what we want to do is start off with yield return new, wait for seconds, and I'm just going to say 2. And what this will do is it'll wait 2 seconds before running the code that comes after this. So I'm just going to put a comment here. So if we come back to this in the future, we know what this is for. We wait 2 seconds before we begin to fade the pop-up out. And then I'm going to say 4, and then we're going to say float fade is equal to 1. And then I'm going to say fade, if fade is greater than 0, then what we want to do is say fade equals fade minus 0.05f. And let's run a check. We're going to say canvas.alpha is equal to fade again. And then we are going to say if fade is less than or equal to 0.05f, then let's just disable the game object. So, whoops. What is going on? Oh my goodness, the brackets. Okay, there we go. Then we can say GameObject.setActive is equal to false. So now that should work. I'm going to save that. I don't believe I'm missing anything here. Let's just end here with our yield return new wait for seconds 0.05. Now we actually have to call the functionality here, or we're never going to have that fade happen. So we need to call fade in pop-up somewhere. So let's make a function up here, public void, display bonfire pop-up, or display bonfire lit pop-up. And then I'm going to use this function to start the coroutine fade in pop-up. And what we want to do is actually have a reference to this on our player's UI manager. So I'm going to make a new header on our player UI manager. It's just called UI manager actually. And I'm going to call this pop-ups. And I'm going to make a variable of type bonfire lit pop-up UI. I'm going to call it bonfire lit pop-up UI. Now I can make this public and drag it in the inspector if I want to. And or I could just simply call it on awake, which actually is what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to erase that public. And I'm coming down here in awake and say bonfire lit pop-up UI is equal to get component in children because it is seated on a game object that is a child of this game object. And then what we want to do here now is make a public void called activate bonfire pop-up. And then we're going to reference our bonfire lit pop-up UI script, and then we're going to call, what do we call it again? Display bonfire lit pop-up. Now, since we have the UI manager and our player manager, let's go back to our Interactable, our Bonfire Interactable script. And we're going to say player manager dot player UI manager. Goodness, it's just called UI manager. I keep forgetting that. And then we're going to say dot activate bonfire pop-up. And then we save. Okay, now if I go into the game here now and press play, and if I run over to our nice new bonfire and I interact with it, it'll change from light bonfire to rest, and then we get the nice pop-up, fades in, and then it fades out. We get those nice little flickering effects around the bonfire, and then the fire starts as well. There you go, guys. That is part 1 of the bonfire. I'm sure we're going to have a few parts of this. We're going to come back to a lot of it when we begin our saving system and such, but if you made it this far, don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment. It does help in my series a lot. You have no idea how much just liking the video does for the series, so I appreciate all of you that do. And as always, a special thanks to my patrons. It's because of you guys I get to keep doing this kind of thing. In other news, I did release a second devlog on my solo project, so if you guys want to, I'll leave a link in the description. You can go over and check that out. I will see you guys in the next one.